Good morning, my name is Delsa D. Dixon, and I'm here with the Black Business Bootcamp in San Diego, California, whose founder is Dr. Willie Moore. Today, we will be hosting Dr. Shirley Weber, who's running for the 79th District State Assembly seat. We hope that you will enjoy the information and join us in electing her for the 79th District State Assembly seat. Thank you.
I want to take a minute out before I introduce our guests. So you leave here today with something. I woke up this morning and I looked at my hands and I said, these are my hands. And when I looked at them, I remembered a quote Mary Cox, Dr. Weber from Booker T. Washington, that said that train these things. And train the mind so the mind will have something for these things to do. And I realized that these are hooks. You call them hands, but they're hooks. See, they're hooks. See, they grab your chicken. They're hooks. And it's amazing that you never hooked on to nothing. You've gone through your whole life, you don't hook on to anything. I went to the internet yesterday. I kicked and I did a whole bunch of things. And I was looking for a barber, Mary Cox. Yes, and I found a barber. He was cutting hair. It took 3 of them to get this haircut done. One of them was the head. They didn't have no hair like you, chicken. Had some hair on the head. One of them was cranking it and keeping the power going. And the other one had the thing like you clean out your sewer. And the clipper was on the end of that. And the one was cutting hair. He said, crank it, crank it, crank it. He was cranking. The more he crank it, the faster the clipper run. And they was cutting this guy's hair. And I said to myself, if there's a will, there's a way.
This is the Black Business Bootcamp Creed. If I say I can climb a mountain and reach its summit with ease, if you can't help me, don't hinder me, please. If I say I can swim a river and reach its banks with ease, don't drown me with greed. Help me across it, please. Willie Moore.
Wow. At this time, I want to introduce Brother Pollard, if you don't mind. He's going to explain to us what is the 79th Assembly District.
This is about, it's about making the representative more in tune to their constituents. So you know the demographics have changed in the state of California, in fact in the United States. And so to reflect that shift of demographics and the census, we had the redistricting. Out of that redistricting process, from the state level, this is what the new map will look like. One of the reasons I wanted to pass this around is so you can look and see the communities that are in the 79th and discover if you're in that assembly district yourself.
I had asked Clovis because Clovis said to me weeks ago, and not to me but to this group, that he wanted to make sure that a black face is in that 79th, 78th Assembly District. He said, well, I'll take on the task of being that person. That's what Clovis told me. Then when Shirley stepped up, then Clovis said, you know what? I think that she has more experience than me, been out there longer. She has more battle scars and more notches on her gun than I do. So I'm going to step back and let her run, and I'm going to join her team and support her. So I asked him if he would come this morning as a boot camper and introduce Shirley Weber.
And I was here last week, most of you were here last week when we announced that we would be supporting Dr. Weber's campaign. So I don't need to make an introduction, but I do want to share with you this. The paradigm shift is in place. You probably have no idea how important Dr. Weber's candidacy is. We have never, I've been in this county and the city for 33 years. we have never in my time in San Diego had the opportunity we have right now for black folk, not just to do what we can for ourselves, but to take leadership in this whole county, really in this whole state. And it goes way deeper than y'all can comprehend because it's a spiritual thing, in a way that has never been ours before. I know when you look at the map, not all you live in the district. I mean, not all y'all can vote, and y'all know a lot of other folks who won't be able to vote. But politics is not just votes, it's also money. And there is no question how important those checks and the folks you know when those checks are going to be. So after you get through hearing from Dr. Weber this morning, start seriously thinking who else you can get to write those checks. Because you don't got to live in a district to write a check. And I remember you talked about, I was with that group that was talking about raising money, $25,000 for Charles Lewis, and I think back then the maximum was $250 per person. So that means that the max was $250 back then, and the max is $3,900 for the state assembly, that we need to be looking at a couple $100,000 to raise from our own community to make sure that we don't miss this opportunity. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, and I almost guarantee we'll never see this day again. We have to get Dr. Weber elected, the 79th Assembly District. And without further ado, I give you Dr. Shirley Weber.
Really, I'm pleased and blessed to be here this morning. I'm always pleased to be in the presence of Willie Morrow. Mr. Morrow is truly an icon in this community, one of the most unselfish persons that's ever been in this community, who truly, truly loves this community. And I really thank him always for everything he does as an innovator, as a businessman, as an advocate for those things that are good and right and just in this community. So I really appreciate him and his support. Probably 2 months ago, I would not have thought that any time that I'd be standing in front of you talking about running for the 79th Assembly District. I looked at it and decided, I'm not sure if this is something that I need to do personally. But then over the last 2 months, I've been involved in a number of things at the university. So many of you know I've spent the last 40 years teaching at San Diego State, building the Africana Studies Department. But more importantly, the university knows me really for being an advocate of this community. Because unlike other professors who've gone to the ivory tower, I've not stayed there. I've gone, and I'm there. But I always come back to my neighborhood and my community where I live. And I've lived in the 79th all of my life that I've been in San Diego. So it's been really a central part of my existence. But as I sat in a meeting of administrators at the university and heard them talking about the cuts and the changes and the dramatic things that are going to happen for the university and for public schools and for education and all the things that were there, I realized that as good as life and God has been to me, that I could not sit back and let these things happen without me making an effort to do something constructive and productive. And it's at that point that I said, you know what, I think I'm going to have to take the challenge of the 79th. Because California is in a horrible, horrible situation. And every act that seems to come out of the state wants to dump it on the least of us. They want to blame the labor unions. They want to blame the pension system of the poor state employees. They want to blame all of those entities without actually looking at itself and its revenue structure and where we're getting money from and the tax loopholes and all those things that basically continue to feed the upper groups and take the 99% and leave them without much. So when I began to look at the efforts to truly dismantle California, to take money from our schools, take money from the small businesses that are here, to not really support the individuals that are here, I realized that all of my years that I've been working in this community, that I had the responsibility to take all I know, all my energy, all my passion, and all my love and represent this community. Some people say, what has happened? Most of you know for 40 years, you know me as an educator. Because I've been there not only at the university, but I've been at a K through 12. And some people say, well, what happened in K through 12? I was there for 8 years. And during those 8 years, some people at the city schools call them the glory years, from 98 to 96. 88 to 96. They call them the glory years if you worked at city schools. Because it was during that time that we really focused upon student achievement. And many of the things you see now that's happening weren't happening at that time. When I came on the board, there were 23 African-American males who had a B grade, a grade point average or better. When I left, we were in the 400s and 500s of them, because we instituted a special program dealing with African-American males. And some of you may remember that program that led to the Golden Pyramid Scholars at the Urban League. And we had young people then wanting to be excellent in achievement. I went to kids and said, you know what, I'm embarrassed. As president of the school board, I'm passing out all these certificates for valedictorians, and I am not passing out one of anybody who look like me. Why are y'all not valedictorians? And I heard all kinds of excuses at a youth conference, a student conference. Eventually I said, no, I got to see me some black valedictorians. I got to see me some Hispanic valedictorians, because I don't see any of you. And in 4 years, I saw about 4 or 5 black and Hispanic valedictorians when I passed out the certificates at schools that year. A miseducation of any one child is a miseducation of us all. And so we went out, and they didn't believe we could do it. And we sold to the whole city the concept of building new schools in communities of people who have low voter turnout. And that's how we got those schools in those communities. But people didn't think that would happen. In fact, when I would go to board meetings, they said, at statewide, they said, you mean to tell me you got people to pass an initiative to build new schools in the old communities? Yes. Because we had to talk a different kind of language. I had to argue a different kind of position. So I had to argue for this community to have those kinds of resources when I was on the school board. When I was on the school board, for the first time in the history of that district, we sold bonds. We had never had a person of color ever sell any of the bonds. 25% of all of our bond sales went to an African-American woman that I advocated for, that I fought for. I told them I'd hold up the whole bond measure if she didn't get any. Then they only gave her 10%. She called me and said, you know, they only gave me 10 and that's good. She said, but the city does 25. I called the superintendent. I said, I understand the policy is 25. Why are we at 10? I said, I know I'm only one vote, but I'll express my one vote. Bank of America didn't want to hear it. As a result, we got to 25. So I began to open up business opportunities. We changed our whole vending system so that small businesses could come in and get contracts immediately. We had vending fairs. And so I was involved in, because I believe very strongly that as I educated children, I had to be concerned about their parents. You know, if their parents didn't have jobs, if their parents didn't have a place to stay, if they didn't have those kinds of resources, and we were a major employer in the city. I said, we must not only educate these children, we should almost help the parents. We're a business as well. And so we began to do that kind of business. And for the first time, I remember Bertha Pendleton broke up a contract. Waxy used to get all the paper contracts in the city because they put them all together, and he was the only one who could meet all of the needs. And Pendleton broke them up into different things. Somebody doing cups, somebody doing plates, somebody doing forks and spoons and all that kind of stuff. And for the first time, we had an African-American man who had a small truck bringing cups to all of our schools. And of course, the major company was upset, and we had some people call us and say, why is he not getting contracts? And we had to explain to them, you know, this is about diversity. This is about bringing different kinds of businesses into city schools. So I spent my whole life doing those kinds of things. And someone said, okay, well, that's a city school. What are you doing now? Many of you know right now that what we're doing is a couple of things. One, I'm on your Citizen Equal Opportunity Commission at Dallas City. And I got on this commission reluctantly because it's a commission that's stuck in the past. 90% of, well, 97 or 97.some% of all contracts went basically to white males in the city. And they were happy and sometimes even angry that they had 97%. They actually sued us at the state level, and we fought them in the lawsuit. I wrote the letter to ask to fight on the lawsuit for them as well, and this was just a year ago. And got the NAACP involved and the state involved because they wanted Caltrans. They were upset that Caltrans had a 7% minority requirement, which meant 93% was going to go to white men. And they sued us, and they lost so far. It's still in litigation. But this gives you some idea of what's happening in the other rooms. And when you're down at this level, you're trying to figure out what's going on, why we don't have any businesses, why we don't have this, why, and that's a part of it. That's a part. Consulting contracts has gone up to 40% in terms of women and minorities. So we've been working hard to disaggregate the data, to fight the commissioners that are there. And we finally got a commission that is willing to work and to bring change. They've been stuck in the past for 10 years. So we're finally bringing this kind of change. The other piece I'm doing the other piece I'm doing is with the schools. Most of us know that the lowest achieving children in any school in the city, and it's not Lincoln, I'm not beating up on Lincoln because reality is there's a Lincoln in every school in this district. that the lowest achieving children in not only in San Diego City, in Lemon Grove, in every school district in this nation is African American children. Which is really quite tragic when you consider all the time and energy we have invested as a people in believing in education. There's a group of, there's the NAACP, there's the Urban League, there's the Neighborhood House, there's the Deltas, and they're all working together on the National Council of Negro Women, along with AAAE, the Association of African American Educators. And we meet monthly. Some of you don't know this. We've been meeting now for about a year and a half, every month with the superintendent and his staff about what they're going to do for our children. Now, kindly, we get resistance from people. Well, why you got to talk about black kids? Why you got to talk about this group? And I tell people, it's not that we're anti any other group. The Hispanics have a Hispanic advisory group. And they've been meeting with the superintendent for 20 years. And getting things that deal with issues that affect Hispanic children. There's an Asian advisory group that does the same thing. So this group now is a task force that focus on African American children and the underachievement. And of course we're getting resistance. I understand there was a major resistance in Mira Mesa to this initiative recently. Says it's discriminatory. Why are you focusing only on one group of kids? And we said, and the superintendent is saying, we're focusing on these children because they're the least achieving children in our district. And you cannot ignore the fact that this is happening. And when you raise their achievement, you raise everybody's achievement. We're really dealing with the superintendent, with the programs in the schools, and all of the schools, not just focused on Lincoln, but all of our schools in terms of what are they doing for parent involvement? What are we doing to reduce the dropout rate? You know, the sad thing is when I was on the school board, Bertha Pendleton became what we call our dropout star. And San Diego City schools had one of the lowest dropout rates of any school district, urban school district in the nation in the early 90s. We had one of the lowest dropout rates of any urban school district in the nation. We now have one of the highest. Almost 50% of all African American males drop out of public schools in the state.
That's great.
And when you consider what the options are for you if you drop out of school, you know what they are: incarceration. And so we talk about the pipeline from school to incarceration because that's basically what's happening. And so we're looking at these kinds of things, and your state assembly person is one who actually deals with these issues of health care. How are we going to provide health care for everyone in the state? How are we going to protect the health care that's here? They deal with health care issues. They also deal with schools. How are we going to fund our schools? How are we going to adequately fund our schools when others don't want to fund those schools? And how are we going to try to work to change the tax base in order to make sure that they're not loopholes so that we can have the funding we need to do what we need for our schools? You know, how are we going to do these kinds of critical things that are so essential? How are we going to rescue people's homes working with the federal government to make sure that everybody's not in foreclosure? How are we going to create jobs and opportunity? How are we going to do these kind of things to make sure that it goes not just from the top, but also goes all the way down so that it basically impacts the lives of those who are here? Was a man who came from Hope, Arkansas. A very segregated, as you know, environment, Hope, Arkansas.
Yep.
And he came here because he had 8 children and he wanted something better for his kids. That was real simple. He wanted a better kind of life. He wanted away from discrimination. But most importantly, he wanted education. Because he was denied an opportunity to go to school. He went as far as the 6th grade. That's as far as they would let a tall, strong black boy go to school because they wanted him to sharecrop and to work for them. And so my father always had a burning desire for his children to go to school. And that was just fundamental in our family, that we could go to school. And he had a philosophy. Some of you heard it because I give a scholarship named after it. It's called Muddy Water and Hollow Logs. He said, I drink muddy water and sleep on a hollow log, baby, if you want to go to school. And he meant that. He meant that to the core of his heart, that he would do whatever's necessary for me to go to school, for us to get an education. And so when I look at him and I look at what his optimism was in the face of discrimination, coming to a new place, getting a job, working in the steel mills that was still a very racist environment. My father had the ultimate optimism about his future and the future of his children in this particular state. That things were just going to be better for the next generation. He firmly believed that. And I told someone, I said, I guess one of my driving forces has always been is that if a man with a 6th grade education could be optimistic about and know with a level of certainty that whatever he's doing is going to be better for his children tomorrow, then surely a sister who has a PhD from UCLA ought to be able to say the same thing.
Amen.
Given the conditions we face right now, given the things that are happening in California, can any of us say life is going to be better for our children? And if you can't say what a man with a 5th grade education can say, then you need to get busy.
Yeah.
You need to start changing what you do.
Yeah.
You need to do it. You need to step up your game. You need to be more vigilant about everything. You need to look at everybody that represents you and ask them the hard questions of life. You need to be much more involved. And that's why I can say that's one of the driving forces for me wanting to run for the assembly. I'm going to have my first grandbaby in a couple of weeks. And in Dallas, my daughter's having her first child. And I want to make sure that when he gets here, that I can say to him, baby, your grandma might be doing great things, but you're going to do even greater things.
Amen.
And tomorrow's going to be better for you.
Yeah.
That's better than it was for me. That opportunities are going to be unlimited. And so I want to, I'm running for the state assembly because I believe very strongly in the 79. I believe in the people here. I think we need to have representation that really represents us. We have people who come from all kind of places that pop into our district and run for office. And we give them the seats. And then they somewhat represent us to move on to the next seat. But we need someone who obviously that we know their passion, we know what they're going to do, that we know what they have done for us, that will continue to represent us and represent us well even when we're sleeping and don't even know the issues on the table. We know that they're going to be taken care of. And so I'm asking for those in the district to support me. There's going to be lots of opposition because we know black folks live in a crab barrel mentality. And one crawls up, the other try to knock them down. That's why I think so much of Clovis, a former student of mine, when he stepped up and said, no, we both of us can't run. We need to figure it out. Let's get it together, and I'm gonna join you so that I can learn from you, and then I can move on to be other kinds of things in this district. And that's very important. But that's what others have done. That's what others do in this race. But we don't always do that. But I firmly believe that this is our time, and this is our moment.
Yeah.
That it's time for us to finally have some representation in Sacramento that is going to represent us well. That this is a challenge we must take. When we win this district, we will have shattered the steel ceiling in this community. Because it's been an elusive thing being on the state assembly ever since I've been here. We've not had anyone from this community represent us on the state assembly. There's not been an African American woman in all of San Diego County at the state assembly. Not one. No, not one. First of all, there's been no African American in the state assembly from south of LA. And there's been no woman in San Diego in any position other than school board. So this is our time. This is our moment. This is a sea change and a shift in thinking. And we have to aggressively pursue it in everything we do. And we're going to find naysayers. Somebody's going to tell you, well, Shirley Weber didn't show up at a meeting on Wednesday. I mean, that's standard procedure. That's standard procedure. They're going to tell you someplace I didn't show up that they wanted me to be or something. We harder on each other than anybody on the face of the earth. I understand that. I understand my people quite well. But we're working with all kinds of folks in this district because the population of us is small, but but fortunately I've been serving everybody in the city. And so we're going to work to try to make this happen. It's unique. We need to give all we can. And like I said, he said give today if you can give more. If people who can give, all those kinds of, we need to work it because money drives these campaigns. And this is going to be a very crazy primary, the first time. Because what happens in the past, the Democrats used to run, and the Republicans used to run, and the Independents used to run. Now they all run together. Oh, wow. Yes. And that's a great concern.
They're all in
the same pot.
Wow.
All in the same pot. And the two top vote getters will run in November. Which technically you could have two Republicans running in a district that is about 60% Democrat.
Wow.